Hello there. My name is Ian Campbell. I am with Mission Partners. I'm the president and CEO, and I am here interviewing startup founder Fabrice Gould. He has a startup company called Diggen, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his company today and why we should be taking notice of it. First things first, Fabrice, tell me a little bit about Diggen.
Yeah, thanks, Ian, for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah, Diggen has actually been one of those ideas that's been incubating in the back of my mind for a long time. I originally moved out to California to join and learn from startups with the eventual goal of starting my own company. So while Diggen was a concept with the first startup I joined over 10 years ago, now is the time that I'm launching it, and it's probably even more relevant today. I've spent the last 10 years really focused on the local search industry and improving the quality of business listings. So whenever you search online for a retail store, a restaurant, any sort of local service, we were the #1 provider of that data to all the search engines. But I also had experience not just on the B2B side, but also with the consumer interactions with our clients. And I saw the amount of consumer data in that space that I saw the value in, but consumers were really not involved in that experience. So Diggen is really about helping the ecosystem to give access to marketers, digital marketers, to make it easier for them to access and use consumer data for their business. And what that means is for consumers, for marketers, sorry, they can understand their audience because they're getting more information than just an anonymous person on their website or mobile app. But also they can use that data to create more relevancy in their email campaigns and personalize the user experience on a website or their mobile app.
Okay. So now, so you say you started working on this about 10 years ago?
Well, I wouldn't say working on it. It's always been an idea incubating in the back of my mind. I really wanted to build up my acumen with startups. So it was really learning over 3 startups I had joined and built out over 10 years. But ironically, I was always focused on the local search space. So now this is getting into consumer data for Diggen, but a lot of parallels between the 2 ecosystems of business data and consumer data.
Okay, interesting. So what is it about, what makes you the guy? What makes you the guy that's kind of that? I mean, because really there's not a lot of people that are, there's people that are focusing on consumer data and personalization and whatnot, and obviously marketers like like plenty of us out there who are trying to figure out how to utilize consumer data. How is it, what was it that you saw that was like, I can do this, I can make this happen?
So a couple of things. #1 was when I originally had the idea, it was noticing that online we were focused so much on the product side of commerce or e-commerce. So that's really where the idea was born. You saw Pandora doing metadata about their music to make a better experience with matching music for consumers. You saw Amazon doing it for books at the time, and you also saw Netflix doing it for movies, and that's great. You get a lot of information about the products that we're interested in. I saw the second half of the equation for e-commerce to be successful is doing that for the individuals, the people online, so you can match based on their data describing themselves. How do I give them the best results and relevancy in what they're searching for? So that's really the genesis of the idea. Why me? Well, #1 is my background in local search. I see a lot of parallels in what I've done over the last 10 years, over 10 years, in improving the quality of business listing data. And it's a very similar trend. We started with signal data coming from literally the print directories and the telecom industry and web crawling and a variety of sources. And the intent was really to move towards who is the authority of that business, which is, you know, the store manager or the business owner, the franchise owner, or maybe even the agencies. And that principle of pursuing the authority is very similar to consumer data. They're a little behind the times, and that's why I see the opportunity today. Is marketers are using a lot of data that exists out there about consumers, but it's really hidden behind the curtain. And you see it in the news today with you know, the news about the NSA and Facebook and Google. Everyone's concerned about their consumer data, who owns it, and how do you control your privacy and having a little more access to it. So I really see this as something that's going to drive this change and enable consumers to have more access and control to their own data. But again, it's to create this alignment between the consumers and the marketers, because they both gain, there's a net benefit for both of them to have a different business model where the consumer has access and control.
Okay. So, you know, it's interesting because one of my favorite questions is, what's the problem you're trying to solve? And it sounds like there's a few different things that you're trying to do, not the least of which being to, of course, bridge the gap between these data sources and marketers, but ultimately to kind of provide more access and probably make, and I would assume, make the data much more accurate, much more relevant to what the marketers are actually trying to do. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think it really comes down to very tactical problems that a marketer or a developer has today, with fragmented systems and fragmented sources of consumer data. And we really act as that middleware and the clearinghouse of all those sources and make it easier for them. So there's no longer any development, maintenance, and support that they have to do. The longer term, more strategic vision of our platform is going more directionally towards the regulation and compliance that's going to be necessary. So a marketer or one of the executives doesn't have to worry about what they're doing with consumer data. They can trust the Diggen platform to treat it appropriately and be happy with focusing on how do they monetize it, but not doing something that might be at risk because it's consumer data.
Interesting. Kind of like a do not call list for the internet, I suppose, right?
That's exactly it. Exactly. You've seen it in the telecom industry, and now with the email and mobile numbers more prevalent, consumers are just getting inundated, and again, they don't have a way to provide some feedback or some control, let alone even the transparency to even know what's going on online.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a second. Looking at the data source aspect of things. Now, there are, you know, from our conversations before, you were telling me that they have, you know, a number of different sources that you can pull data from and kind of move over there. Of course, it's really expensive to do so, and it costs a lot of money, which is one of the big benefits that we'll get into about your platform in a minute. But is from the data source side of things, am I sitting inside of like 4 different databases somewhere with various information that now, that someday rather, I'll be able to go in and say, okay, I want this database is more focused on retail and luxury items, so I want I don't want my income level talked about in that, or I mean, what sort of control will I be, or should I guess, be able to have to my own data?
That's right. So whenever you're kind of a marketplace business model, it's always the challenge of the chicken and egg, right? So today we're focused on our strategy with the marketers and giving them easier access to consumer data, because that really is their goal of improving a lot of their key business metrics. The second part of the strategy, as you had mentioned, is giving more insight, transparency, and control to the consumer. So we're really focused on right now helping the marketers, and with the marketers, it's really a challenge of access, right? The marketers don't typically have the technical background or even access to their own development team that's focused on the product. So you notice that it's usually the larger corporations, even getting into the Fortune 1000 and the larger e-commerce platforms or services that can afford to personalize. They can afford to license and purchase data. They can afford to have teams around learning the integration points and how to deliver it to their marketing organization. When you get into the smaller and mid-size businesses, particularly in e-commerce, they don't have that sort of sophistication or even the resources to implement that. And that's really where we jump in and kind of equal the playing field across all the different companies and essentially outsource it to us. We are the experts in consumer data, and we can focus on providing the integration points and plumbing so that the marketer doesn't have to worry about technical and operational decisions. They can really just focus on, well, what should we personalize and how should we segment our campaigns so that we can have a lift in our for example. So I really believe that we're really taking out a lot of the time-consuming work for a marketer and really just allowing them to be successful at their job regardless of the size of the company.
Okay. So you mentioned plumbing. Does that mean that me as a marketer, I can flush bad data sources down the drain if I need to?
Well, and you know, it's an analogy, if that's the correct word. But it's the plumbing, allowing consumer data to flow a little easier, and everyone's more successful. But yeah, you will see where a marketer might realize, well, maybe this is not the right source of data for my type of business or my audience. And in today's world, if that happens, they made a bad decision and they spent so much money on that integration work. It's almost project work that they couldn't change data providers or enhance their data source. With Diggen, we really remove those challenges. So if they want to add a new source or they want to shift to a new source, it's simple click of the buttons. It's no longer learning APIs or installing databases and putting integration points into their tools.
Awesome. Excellent. So what I'm hearing is there are three main business benefits and three main drivers to this that I would really want to kind of focus on. The access being one of them, two being the ease of use and the ease of access, and then the third being the cost savings that go along with all of that. Is that can you touch on those a little bit for me?
Yeah, sure. So the first one is just access. I've talked to many marketers, and they're either always been interested in doing these initiatives, but it's been cost prohibitive, and then the other half don't even realize that there is this sort of data that they should be leveraging to improve their campaigns. So just simply giving them easier access and making them aware that this data exists about their audience is a big win. So they can already start using that as really just a raw ingredient to all of their marketing campaigns to ultimately, improve their engagement and conversions with their consumers. The second one was the ease of access. So it's not just being aware that the data is there in the first place and making it available to them, but even just easier for them to access. So we really want to focus on eliminating those barriers and no longer making it a technical decision for an organization. Now it's really just a marketing decision, right? We need data and we need to improve our metrics. No longer do they have to decide, well, which one is easier to implement, which one is more cost-effective to support. We really take all that off their hands, and it's essentially a non-issue for them to implement. Sorry, what was the third one?
The cost savings.
Yeah, three benefits.
You're saving me money ultimately. If I'm a guy that wants to use this stuff and I use your platform, I'm going to end up saving a lot of money from what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah, no, exactly, and it works on both sides of the equation. Number one, it's more cost effective, so you're not worried about your budget. But on the other hand, obviously, by making it easier for them to implement, the real goal is to give these tools and data into the marketer's hands so they can impact the revenue side and increase their conversions and ultimately increase their revenue.
Excellent, excellent. Well, there you have it. That's kind of was going to be my next question. What does that mean for me ultimately? But I think you just answered those all three of those pretty effectively. Is there anything that I'm missing? Anything else that from a business benefit aspect of things, for me as a marketer, me as an executive, me as someone who needs to sell this to my boss, right? Sell this concept to my boss. Is there anything else that I should really be focusing on?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you see it even more common in the startup world. I just am passionate about building out businesses, so I realize it's always about starting businesses and growing them and building them out. In the startup world, most entrepreneurs don't even really know their audience, right? They're looking for pursuing a client base to sell them something, and it's really challenging. They're trying to figure out what's the right product, what's the problem, what's the solution, and sometimes what they really miss is who is their audience. Either who are they trying to target, or who is their current customers. And I think that's a really big part of the equation to solve, to figure out how to scale that. So I don't see it just as the larger companies that are really trying to optimize and scale their revenue. Also the smaller companies and mid-sized companies that are struggling with their margins and trying to figure out how to scale this. One of the things that's really crucial is understanding your audience. And that's what this data does, is starts with sharing more data about their users so then they can make better decisions, not just at the marketing level, but you could actually argue at the product development level, so they know how to build out new features for a solution for their audience.
Excellent, excellent. So who is your target? You've mentioned startups, you've talked about a little bit about the mid-market and whatnot. Kind of where do you see this having the biggest bang for the buck, I suppose?
Yeah, so this is a pretty complex ecosystem. There's a lot of players in it. Our #1 priority is marketers for sites, and typically start the early and mid-size companies. When you get into the larger corporations, they have big budgets and they have complete solutions from brand names that you know. So it's really targeting the marketers that are either starting to look at how do I incorporate consumer data into my strategy, and the ones that maybe need a little awareness to say, hey, this is something that might accelerate your progress. So marketers to us is #1. I think they're the ones that get the most value out of it. They're obviously the ones that are paying for the service directly. But in the ecosystem, there are other players. Two that are really important as middleware. One are the data providers. They have great data. Some of them are not as technically savvy, so they also need some help with some technology to make it easier for marketers to gain access to their quality data. So that's another value add we can provide, is the technology to enable that data to be delivered to marketers. And then the other half of the equation for middleware is the marketing tools and the platforms. So platforms can range from your CRM and marketing automation, your email service provider, your content management service or tool, your e-commerce platform, which is obviously essential for revenue generation and management. The one that's actually the most interesting to me is for a marketer, they're always looking at optimizing campaigns, learning. It's the typical iteration of learning your audience and what resonates and what converts. So I really see the future of consumer data being delivered to marketers is the A/B testing that's going to be involved, and that's really the optimization that goes on. We provide the data. There are tools out there, but I think that combination provides a pretty brilliant solution for marketers to really figure out what resonates with their products that they're selling, but to their audience. And it's going to take time for them to learn how should they segment the message and the products that they're displaying to their audience to get the best return, ROI. And I'm pretty excited about that because I think that's where the fun really starts, is marketers being able to run these little tests and learn, and hopefully we're really accelerating the growth of their business, and that's what really gets me excited.
So are we coming up on an age now where, you know, if I go to a website, if I go to eddiebauer.com, is it going to say, "Hi, Ian, welcome back," even if I've never been logged into the shopping cart before?
Yeah, so that's kind of the long-term goal. I think, you know, there's been a little bit of a lashback as, you know, consumers are getting a little, honestly, creeped out by it. I think there's a nice balance that we have to figure out. A lot of it has to do just education to consumers. But one of the things that's really missing, which is our longer-term strategy, is being the consumer advocate and making them aware that not only does this data exist, and not only does it benefit them to for the marketers to have that data, because then they're getting more relevancy in, you know, their emails and on the website and mobile apps. But the last piece, which is really where we really help out, is the compliancy of allowing consumers to have some feedback in that process. You've seen it before where, you know, you've gotten an incorrect offer and it's bizarre to you and you don't know why. There's probably a reason behind the scenes. But when it is done well and it's kind of this kind of magical experience and you're like, wow, that's exactly what I was looking for, that's when it really works. So if we can make it more and more frequent, there it works, but also educating consumers of what's going on behind the scenes, which is really the piece that's missing, I think that's where it becomes a complete solution that everyone's happy with, the marketer and the consumer.
So what you're saying is, if I start getting emails about ladies' underwear, I shouldn't take it as a personal offense that I'm putting on weight, right?
That's right. But even more important is when you see something like that, you have the ability to let them know, hey, you have something incorrect in my profile, and there's probably something that has told them to target you. I don't want to take a guess at why, but it would be helpful for you that the next time you get an email from them, it's not that you are frustrated that you got some spam email, but it would be helpful for you to tell them either, I'm not interested in your services because you only sell women's underwear, or maybe they actually sell men's underwear and it would be more relevant to you and you would actually buy from them if they were targeting you more appropriately.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Excellent, excellent. Very cool, man. Very cool. So what's next? You're going to South by Southwest. That's kind of a big get.
That's right. Yeah, we're pretty excited about that. Normally not something I would do, particularly being B2B. You really can't kind of showcase if you're not really a consumer app or consumer facing. The story is a little different. But we're going with another company that's launching and doing a big splash, so we're going to focus our efforts on getting a little more brand awareness and getting our name out there. They're also going to be our client, so it's a great way to learn from them and be around them during the conference, and obviously enjoy the conference. I haven't attended it before, so I hear it's a fun time, so it's, you know, a little business and pleasure mixed in, but I think it'll be really helpful for us to get our name out there for Diggen.
Absolutely, and besides business and pleasure, let's be real, that's why most of us start startups, right? You know,
that's right.
For ourselves. Fantastic, fantastic. Well, Fabrice, anything else that we should know from you, or where you're headed, or anything else that we should know about Diggen before we sign off?
No, I'd just say look for us coming in the future. We're going to start with more of the B2B enterprise play, but we're looking forward for consumers to really understand, and I think that's where the real value is, where we can share some of that to the public and the people to understand what's going on behind the scenes and why it really benefits them. So I'm actually looking forward to start communicating that out in the future.
Fantastic, man. Fantastic. Well, I mean, I know that we're all looking forward to seeing what you guys do and being educated a little bit more on why we're getting the emails and getting the targeted marketing messaging that we're getting right now. So it'll be great to see it come out. So I'm looking forward to that. So, well, Fabrice Gould from Diggen, thank you so much for joining us today. And like I said, keep an eye out for him at South by Southwest if you're going to be there. Keep an eye out on Diggen.com and all of his social media channels at Diggen.com as well. So we'll have all that information up, and looking forward to seeing more from you.
Great. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Fabrice.